Hey agents, Dust Storm Rising is here, and after spending quite a bit of time with it, I don't think it has simply given us a new event to play. Yes, the distance modifiers encourage us to fight from particular ranges, but that's only part of the story. The dust storm also reduces visibility, makes enemies much harder to track, and even affects the consistency of some utility skills that many support builds rely on. It didn't take me very long to realize that some of my favorite builds just weren't performing the way they used to. So instead of asking myself, what's the best build for Dust Storm Rising? I found myself asking a different question. What has changed and how should I adapt my combat approach and my build to solve it? That question became the foundation of what I now call adaptive build design. There's certainly no shortage of Dust Storm Rising builds promising huge damage numbers, and there's nothing wrong with that. We've all copied builds at one time or another, but I've become much more interested in understanding why a build should change in the first place. For me, good build design doesn't begin with gear. It begins with understanding the battlefield. Once I understand what's changed, I can start identifying the new constraints, thinking through the problems they've created, and then connecting the mechanics, talents, skills, gear, and tactics that solve those problems. Sometimes that means replacing an entire build. More often, it means making a handful of thoughtful adaptations that produce much better results. So rather than simply show you another build, I'd like to walk you through the thinking behind this one. My hope is that even if you never copy a single piece of gear I'm using, you'll leave with a process you can apply whenever Ubisoft changes the battlefield again. When I looked at Dust Storm Rising, 4 problems immediately stood out. The first was visibility. During a full dust storm, especially at night, we're operating with far less information than we're used to. Enemies disappear into the dust, flank from unexpected directions, and sometimes seem to materialize right beside you. Before long, you're reacting to the fight instead of controlling it. The second problem was target acquisition. Adding more weapon damage doesn't help if you can't consistently find your next target. If you can't hit, you can't crit, and if you're spending precious seconds searching for enemies instead of engaging them, your overall damage drops regardless of what your build says on paper. The third problem was reliable team support. One of my favorite support builds uses refactor with an assault turret and striker drone to generate continuous team repairs. Under normal circumstances, it's extremely dependable. But during Dust Storm Rising, I kept noticing something odd. The skills were tracking enemies. I could see the targeting lasers moving around, but they weren't always firing. No skill damage meant no conversion into team repairs, and that made the build far less consistent than I was comfortable with. The final problem was straightforward. Even while supporting the team, I still wanted to contribute meaningful weapon damage. Strong support shouldn't come at the expense of becoming a passenger in the fight. Once I'd identified those 4 problems, the design process became much clearer. I wasn't looking for the strongest build, I was looking for solutions. The first question I asked was, how do I improve battlefield awareness? The obvious answers were the scanner pulse and the technician's linked laser pointer. At first glance, they seemed to do the same thing, but after using them together, I realized they're actually solving different parts of the same problem. The scanner pulse is an area solution. It gives my team and me broad awareness of what's happening across the battlefield. It highlights enemies through walls, vehicles, and buildings, so we can see lines of attack we might otherwise miss through the dust, distance, and cover. Like any utility skill, cooldown must be managed, otherwise the team is left in the dark, sometimes quite literally. To improve uptime, skill haste mods and the named Night Watcher mask can help considerably, allowing me to keep lighting up the combat area again and again. The linked laser is a point solution and works differently. It's a weapon attachment from the technician specialization, and because it's not a utility skill, it has no cooldown at all. In fact, it's always instantly available even when hunters are jamming utilities, so it will work even if your scanner pulse is offline. The trade-off, however, is that it requires line of sight, so it won't broadly reveal enemies hiding behind walls or other cover. The more I played with both the scanner pulse and the linked laser, the more I realized they weren't really competing with each other at all. In fact, when used together, they not only improve visibility, but also target acquisition. And, perhaps most importantly, they buy me time. Time to build stacks. That was the part I hadn't expected. To be honest, it's never been one of my favorite gear sets. But Dust Storm Rising changed the equation. Pulsing the surrounding area let me identify enemy groups earlier, giving me time to position safely and begin stacking tipping scales before those enemies became an immediate threat. This helped not just me but everyone on the team, especially when they needed to ramp up their stacks because they were using the same gear set. That's when things started to click. Scanner Pulse gave me the information. Tipping scales rewarded me for acting on it. And because the linked laser provided a persistent pulse on whatever I was engaging, the whole system began working together. But there's more. The next question almost answered itself. If refactor was becoming inconsistent because my skills weren't always firing, what other mechanic could provide reliable team repairs? That led me to the Caduceus. I've often described it as refactor in a gun. It may not be as powerful as refactor itself when only one player is running a high crit build, but it also doesn't require a skill build, yellow cores, or sustained assault turret and striker drone uptime. Instead, it scales with critical hits. The higher your critical hit damage, and the more frequently you crit, the stronger the repairs become. That made Caduceus an obvious fit for tipping scales, one of the highest critical hit damage builds in the game. If a teammate starts taking damage, or I need repairs myself, I can quickly switch to the Caduceus and immediately begin repairing while staying engaged in the fight. My friend Dispatch tested a variety of builds to determine which one produced the strongest repairs with the Caduceus. He's someone whose mathematical work I've respected for a long time, and his numbers showed that combining tipping scales with overdogs and the salvo holster produced some of the strongest Caduceus healing currently available. I'll include a link to his deep dive in the description section of this video. But here's where I had to diverge and adapt. Overdogs is mathematically what sends damage numbers into the stratosphere, thanks to its 30% weapon damage amplifier. But not everyone uses it properly because its talent is very strict. You have to identify enemy tiers correctly and eliminate them in the proper order. Unfortunately, some content creators have unintentionally taught players to prioritize enemies by color. While that makes for a simple explanation, it's mechanically inaccurate, and it has left many players unknowingly missing one of the strongest damage amplifiers in the game. This is where I had to apply learnings from Dispatch and make adjustments. The problem wasn't his data. The problem was me. Between the dust, overlapping icons, visual clutter, and enemies moving through reduced visibility, I wasn't consistently identifying enemy roles quickly enough to get the most out of overdogs. I'm an older guy with 30 years of eye strain working in front of computers, so it wasn't a damage problem, but a discernment problem. And here's another consideration. Sometimes the highest priority target in the fight isn't the next target overdogs needs. If a teammate is about to go down because of a higher tier enemy, I'm not going to ignore that threat just because I haven't cleared lower tiers first. Likewise, if a tier 1 or 2 suddenly pushes my position before I've worked through tier 3s, overdogs simply won't amplify my damage against the immediate threat. That's the difference between theory and action. Damage on paper versus damage in combat. I love the idea behind overdogs, but the reality is having to activate and maintain uptime even when the fight becomes highly chaotic and unpredictable and takes place at breakneck speeds. I need a simpler form of amplification, but few sources are that powerful or may detract from what I need from this build. Those that could work offer less amplification, and that got me thinking, what if the answer isn't with one amplifier, but two? You see, amplifiers don't add up like, say, crits do. They multiply independently and are at the final stages of the damage equation. Give a build damage to armor, and an amplifier will multiply what DTA has multiplied. Give it crits, it'll multiply crit damage. Give it 2 amplifiers, now we're talking. Then the second amplifier multiplies everything the first amplifier has multiplied. 2 can lengthen the damage equation for more significant results. What do you think, agents? Let's test this theory together. First, let's start with a tipping scales build with no damage amplifiers at all. I'm using a Pestilence at expertise level 30, and its talent doesn't amplify. Although the closer chest does have one, we won't pulse the target to activate it, so there's nothing that will amplify the damage we're about to deal. Once at full tipping scale stacks, the crits reach about 830k. So remember this 830k as our testing baseline. Let's now put on the Overdog's gloves. The build is fundamentally the same as the first. The goal is to isolate the impact of using only the Overdog's talent. At full tipping scale stacks, we reach up to 1.156 million. That's a significant jump from 830k. The next test involves the military MK16 replica, and it has the normal flatline talent. I've expertised this to level 30, so it has the same 139k weapon damage as the Pesty. Please ignore the magazine capacity. They've been inflated by the season's modifiers. This time, we'll pulse the target to activate flatline and the chest's perfect spotter talent. That's 2 amplifiers in action. At full tipping scale stacks, we reach up to, get this, 1.17 million. That very slightly edges out Overdogs. Let that sink in for a moment. Either flatline or spotter alone couldn't do this. There's no magic here, just math. Rather than pouring everything into crit damage, I leaned into the game's natural damage mechanics by diversifying into separate damage buckets with amplifiers. The result is damage that rivals Overdogs, but with far greater flexibility, availability, and uptime. Now, you should know me by now. This isn't about whether my solution becomes the new meta. Every design choice comes with trade-offs. I prefer Gunner, but the linked laser is tied to the technician specialization. That means giving up some genuinely valuable benefits. Gunner's 10% armor on kill, 5% rate of fire on kill, and supply line, which regenerates ammo for both me and my group. Those aren't insignificant sacrifices. Now, these shooting range tests are only demonstrating the underlying mechanics in isolation. Combat is different. Out in the field, damage changes constantly as teammates contribute buffs, amplifiers, debuffs, and other bonuses. Those numbers will vary from group to group. The point isn't the exact number, it's understanding why the damage increases in the first place, so you can recognize and build around those interactions. Looking at the finished build now, every piece of it can be traced back to one of those original Battlefield problems. I didn't begin with talents, gear sets, or damage numbers. I started with the battlefield. Each solution created the conditions that made the next solution possible. That's the part I find most interesting. A build isn't just something we assemble, it's something we discover by understanding the problems we're trying to solve. So that's my thought process, and I hope it encourages yours. Ubisoft will keep changing the battlefield. New mechanics, new enemies, new gear, and new challenges will continue to reshape the game. And when they do, we'll have to adapt. Builds aren't merely collections of powerful gear pieces. They're systems where every mechanic, talent, skill, and weapon should solve a problem or support another solution somewhere else in the build. For yourself and, ideally, for your team. I didn't start with a build and try to justify it. I started with the problems, and the build emerged from the solutions. And that's adaptive build design.